Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. In this week's guitar lesson, we have a really cool ragtime blues that you can play with a pick. This is something that you can play solo guitar. You don't need any jam track or any accompaniment. And so I've got the lesson split into two parts. In this video, we'll take a look at the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half and get the tablature and the on-screen tab viewer for this lesson, you can go to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP329. Alright, so one of the things you've probably noticed is that I have a different background. Now this is not something that's going to stay. I just had it set up that way because I was shooting some blues videos for the company B&G. They're the ones that make this guitar, which you've seen me use in videos over the past year or so. This is called the Caletta, C-A-L-E-T-T-A. Awesome little blues guitar. They're also the same company that make the Little Sister, which you've seen me play as well, electric guitar. But anyway, I wanted to change the background up and make it something that didn't show anything modern. I didn't want to have Kemper profilers and anything like that. So I set it up this way. And I thought, while I have it set up that way, why don't I go ahead and create a ragtime blues thing to sort of match that environment, and we'll just do a lesson in front of that backdrop instead of having to change it up. So that's why it looks that way. And that's why we're going to do a ragtime blues this week. Now this is something I'm playing with a pick, and because there's a lot of strumming that's involved. So if you're a fingerstyle player, you can do this by strumming with your thumb. But this is really more intended for, I guess, for pick players. So try and follow along with the pick if you can. So let's talk about the song. Now this song is played in the key of E, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through the chords just so you have them. So you might want to write these down. If you're a premium member, you can have the tablature, which has the chords all spelled out in that. But if not, you're going to want to write them down so that you have the chords. And then we're going to go over the strum pattern. So we're just going to get those two things out of the way first, and then we'll get into layering on the melody and getting into the specific licks and things that sort of enhance all of that. So the chords, we're playing this in the key of E. So we have the one chord, which is an E, and then the 4 chord, which is an A, and then we go back to the E. And then we switch to an E7. Now you're going to hear a lot of 7 chord, dominant 7 chords. It's very common in blues. So we have the E, A, E, E7, and then we go to the A7, back to the E, and then back to the A7, back to the E, C sharp 7, F sharp 7, B7, and back to the E. And that's really the first time through. There's another little part which I'll get to in a minute, but that's most of what we're going to be playing over. So those are the chords. Now notice I kept saying 7, like a B7, F sharp 7. What's the deal with the 7 chord? Well, just know this. If you're playing something that's that you're wanting to make sound a little more bluesy, you can always take whatever that chord is and make it a dominant 7 chord. Especially if it's like a 1, 4, 5 chord progression. It's like a G, a C, a D. That's a 1, 4, 5. Instead of just playing those major chords the way they are, if I made those 7 chords, so a G7, a C7, and a D7, you can hear how it changed the feel of that and gives it much more of a bluesy feel. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're wanting to blues things up again, take whatever the chord is and make it a dominant 7 chord. A little takeaway, but I thought it's worth mentioning. Okay, so those are the chords. Now let's talk about the strum pattern. So the strum pattern, the one thing that I'm gonna keep saying over and over again because it's so important, is the right hand has to stay in motion. And there's a shuffle to this. This is not played down, up, down, up. It's not robotic. It's down, up, down, up, down, up, down, like that. Now the other thing to mention is we're going to be accenting, at least in this first part, we're going to be accenting the 2 and the 4. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now notice I'm just playing an E chord there, but I'm being a little more aggressive when I get to the 2 and the 4 beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. So listen to this. So the first thing we're going to learn goes like this. And what I'm doing is I'm starting with my ring finger on the 3rd fret 1st string. I'm doing an upstroke to start that. And then I slide up to the 4th fret. Pretty easy. But the trick is when you slide into that 4th fret, at the same time that you create that 4th fret note, you're going to do a downstroke on the 6th string, the open E string. So it goes like this. practice that. And that is the 1. So it's 1, 2. Okay, so after that, you're going to play an upstroke on the 1 string. And then you're going to go ahead and make the E chord and do a downstroke. And that's the first little part. Okay, now after that, we're going to switch to the 4 chord. That's an A chord. That's where I'm going to cram all 3 fingers here into the 2nd fret, strings 2, 3, and 4. Play a downstroke and then an upstroke on that open 1 string. And the reason I didn't bar it like this was because I wanted that 1 string to ring out. Now some people are able to bar and let that 1 string ring out with their bar. They can, more of like a double jointed thing. I can't do that with my fingers, so I have to cram all 3 fingers in here. So we have, and then there's a muted strum after that. So after you play the A, you're just going to let your hand fall down, and I go ahead and loosen the tension here with my left hand so that it mutes the string. Now after that, I'm going to do another upstroke on that 1 string and play in the E chord, and then pinky goes down on the 3rd fret 2nd string to play the E7 chord. And that's how you play it. It's up, down, up, up. So let's back up from the beginning. We have and you can feel that motion that's happening with the right hand. That's the key. There's going to be variations. This is a hard thing to teach, to try and teach strum patterns, because every time I play it, it's a little different. And so trying to tab this out was a real challenge, and trying to stick to the tab as I'm teaching it, that's an even bigger challenge. But just know the one constant is the right hand being in motion. Even if you're not playing a note. If you're not playing a note, you're still keeping motion. You just skip the note that you would be playing. So, then we go to the 4 chord. Now, I could have just played the A chord and went back to the E chord, but I wanted to give you a really cool blues fill lick. And so what we're going to do, so much that I could say about this lick, but let's learn how to play it first. So what we're going to do is we're going to bar the first 4 strings on the 2nd fret. I'm going to play a downstroke on the open 5th string, and then I'm going to do an upstroke on the 3rd string, which is behind that bar there on the 2nd fret. And then you play. So that's while that bar is there, and that bar stays the whole time. Middle finger goes down on the 3rd fret 5th string, and then you do a hammer on to the 4th fret 5th string with your ring finger. And then so that's a downstroke. Then we do an upstroke on the 4th string behind the bar on the 2nd fret. So you have. And then I use my ring finger because I find it easier to come up and grab the 5th fret 4th string. And what I do is you play the 5th fret 4th string, slide it down to the 4th fret, and then you come down to the 2nd fret, all on that 4th string. Ring finger goes down on the 4th fret 5th string, and then we end on the 2nd fret 4th string, which is an E note. And then you match that note an octave lower by playing the low E string, which is the open 6th string. So altogether, that A lick. So what can you do with that? Well, one example would be if you're playing a rhythm, a shuffle rhythm. You can take just that first part of that. Isn't that nice? Or you can take the second part. So you can start to take these things and work them into your playing. So now if you're playing an A rhythm, or something in a rhythm in A, you've got that little fill lick, and it's real easy to find. Another little sidebar is if you want to do the same thing in the key of E, you can just go up a set of strings this direction. So you play. So play around with that lick, but that's what I'm doing over the A chord. Instead of just playing a chord, I played. Now after we come to the E, I go back to the 4 chord, hit the open E string again, the open 6th string, and then back to the 1 chord, which is the E. I could say so much about that, but so what I'm doing there is I'm just barring the first 4 strings on the 2nd fret, playing the A, and then we come back to the E chord, but I hammer on with my index finger to the 1st fret, 3rd string. And I find myself doing that all the time when I'm playing an E chord. I don't just play an E chord straight, usually, especially in a blues. I like to hammer that on. And I even more like to work in the 4 chord. So instead of just playing the 1 chord, you could always go... Look at that, I'm just E to A to E to A, but isn't that cool? And you can do that anywhere in the neck. You're not limited to just first position or just playing it down and playing over an E chord. If you're playing something in G, so start to experiment with this stuff and practice that, rocking from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. It's something you hear a lot of piano players do, and it just really spices up your rhythm. Okay, a lot of sidetracks there, but I think they're important. Let's back up from the beginning and play up to where we are. So we have... Okay, now after that, then we go back to the 4 chord, which is the A, and this time I went... just to give you a nice little bluesy fill lick. So what I'm doing is I'm playing the A chord, but I'm adding my ring finger to the 3rd fret 1st string, which is an A7 chord. And the lick goes like this. So it's, you play the whole chord, take your hand off and play the open 1 string, 2nd fret, 2nd string, and then back to the 1 string with an upstroke. So you have, and then I played that twice. Actually, that time when I did the upstroke, the 2nd upstroke, I hit strings 1 and 2 so that I can come back to the E chord. And that's another reason why there's so many blues songs that are played in the key of E or in the key of A, is because you have these open strings that ring out like that, especially in the key of E. And so you can let something ring out, take your hand off and reposition it to a different chord position. All right, so from the beginning. Then we go, so we walk up to a C sharp 7 chord. Now I'm going to explain why this chord works in just a minute, but to get there, it's just the 2nd fret, 3rd fret, and the 4th fret, all on the 5th string. Make sure you land that note with your middle finger so that these other 2 fingers can fall into place here, and then your middle finger is on the 4th fret, 5th string. So you have just those 3 notes. Strings 5, 4, and 3. Now that's the same shape as a D7 chord down in 1st position, so that makes it easy to visualize. And so after we play the C sharp 7 chord, then we go to an F sharp 7. And what I'm doing for that, just think your F chord, slide it up 1, that's F sharp, and then take your pinky up. That's the way that I like to make a 7 chord. It's so easy. It's just a bar and 2 fingers. So you can see it's the same thing as your major bar chord using the E chord shape, but you take your pinky off and you have a real nice sounding 7 chord. So same strum pattern, and then the last chord is a B7 chord. You know how to make that one down in 1st position. We're going to make that chord, but we're going to put our pinky up here on the 2nd fret 1st string. And then the song repeats at that point. Now I said I would explain why the C sharp 7 and why the F sharp 7. Well, one common thing that happens in blues and country and lots of different styles, jazz, is a modulation that happens going from the 1 chord to the major 2 chord. So in this case we're playing in the key of E, so that's our 1 chord. So if we were to play a 2 chord, typically that would be a minor chord. It would be your F sharp minor if we're playing an E. But if you play a major 2 chord, it sounds really, really good to go to the major 2, and then back to the 5 chord, and then back to your 1 chord. It's just a nice little break from that. And you hear that in so much music, that walk up from the 1 to the major 2. But what I realized at one point, somebody had explained this to me, when you hear this, that C sharp 7 is actually the 5 chord of the 2 chord. So let that soak in for a minute. But that's what's happening. So the 2 chord is your F sharp, right? So the 5 chord of F sharp is C sharp. So that's what's happening, is you're getting to the 5 chord, which needs, so it's a tension that needs release. The release is back to the 1 chord of that 5 chord. So you've got your tension and your release, and then you do the same thing, or the 5 chord releasing back to the 1 chord. And you hear that in a lot of music. Dixieland uses that a lot. 5 of the 2, there's the 2, there's the 5, there's the 1. So that's why that works. And don't let that get confusing if you don't understand what I mean by the numbers. Just don't worry about it. But that's how we're playing. So let's back up from the beginning and play up to that point. Alright, so I think that would probably be a good place to stop in this part 1 video. We've already covered a lot of information. In the part 2 video, we'll go through the second half. And remember, as a premium member, you get access to that and the tablature and all the other assets and the entire back catalog of lessons, which I have about 8 years worth now. So lots and lots of lessons. So let's go back from the beginning. I'm going to play through this slowly, and that's going to wrap up this first half. So here we go.